It's pretty simple, right? Like if you think that Bitcoin is worth probably more than gold because it's digital and other factors, then it should trade. Then it's got 10 times or more upside now, right? So like, why would you sell it? Why wouldn't you just buy more? And so that's how I think about it. It's very simple, and I think that is such a powerful concept. It's so simple, but that's what gets a lot of CEOs potentially interested. I just believe in the value of Bitcoin. I want to own a lot of it because I think there's tremendous upside in it.
Everyone now is waking up to this idea of putting Bitcoin on the balance sheet. Most of the companies, I think Simon, said, hey, look, we had this company, it went through this hard time during COVID, and so we had to figure something else out. I think that Strategy and many others, they didn't have kind of a core business that was working and was exciting, and so it came out of a position of needing to do something different. You may be a little bit different, right, in terms of why you did this and how the business is set up. So tell us the story of, Semler, and then also why did you put Bitcoin on the balance sheet given the business that you have that's non-Bitcoin?
Yeah, I would say it was kind of the last thing we ever expected to do. We were a relatively small board. Our board owned over 30% of the stock, the shares. I had not been involved in the company for a long time. I was one of the initial investors in it, and it had been around for 20 years before I got involved. It was a public company for 10 years. And I was kind of spending my time as, I ran a hedge fund for almost 20 years and still doing that as a family office. So it was something I got involved in because I had become more of an activist as an investor. And I noticed that Semler Scientific was kind of faltering and needed help and needed more of a focus on maximizing shareholder value, which is something that I feel like I'm good at doing. So I made a pitch to the board to put me on the board, and brought on another shareholder, and eventually became chairman of the board. This is like 2 years ago. And when I first got there, the total focus was on doing acquisitions in the medical area. We're a medical device and software business. So we spent about a year just grinding through so many deals, private deals mostly, looking at companies that might be accretive, for us to buy. And it was really a black box. There was just very little to do. And we were spinning our wheels. And as this was happening, I followed Bitcoin closely. I've been an investor in it, and was an investor in MicroStrategy, and was listening, like Simon, just listening to Michael Saylor very closely. And when I heard him talk about these zombie companies, I kind of thought about, God, is he talking to me? Like, it just resonated. It was so, I felt like we were MicroStrategy, the way he described it in August of 2020. Half our market cap was in cash, and we were making money. We were making about $20 million plus a year in our business, and it was slowing down a lot. And we were looking for a way to restart growth. And I don't know, I guess like Simon, I just listened to too many of his podcasts, and I went to our board and I said, you guys got to listen to this guy. I think he might have a solution for us. And I was shocked because none of them owned Bitcoin. They weren't following it that closely, but they were able to kind of get it and saw the kind of the value creation opportunity. So I didn't know Michael Saylor, and I tried to reach him through Tom Lee, who's a close friend of mine from Fundstrat, and I'm on the board of Fundstrat. So Tom put me in touch with Michael. Michael called me like instantly. It was like immediate. And at that point, there hadn't been any public companies other than MicroStrategy that were pursuing his strategy. And he explained it to me. He was incredibly generous and, helpful. And we ended up being the second, U.S. public company to adopt a Bitcoin primary reserve strategy. Actually, very similar. It was almost coincidental with Metaplanet. We were kind of reached this conclusion totally separately around the same time.
When you think of putting Bitcoin on the balance sheet, most people will say, well, that's a good economic decision. But because you have an operating business that's profitable, that is separate from Bitcoin, a lot of Bitcoiners know about you now. And there's a lot of Bitcoiners that work in a lot of different businesses, or they buy products, right? They buy medical products. They use medical software. Have you seen a lift in the operating business because of the notoriety of putting Bitcoin on the balance sheet?
No, actually, it surprises me. Our customers are huge companies, huge that you've all heard of in this room, and it has not come up at all. And interestingly, we had some shareholders kind of scratching their head a little bit when we announced this strategy, but the stock did so well that we really didn't get any negative feedback either, from customers or from shareholders. I would say that it's kind of been pretty siloed, and which I think is great in a way. I mean, it'd be great to get a lift from it. I mean, we're starting to think a lot about how the two concepts are intersect. Like what we do. We help people avoid getting very serious cardiovascular diseases, vascular diseases. In some way, we're providing medical freedom, and by owning Bitcoin, we're exercising financial freedom. So there's kind of this crossover between the two that we ourselves as a company kind of view what we're doing. We kind of want to live by this slogan of medical and monetary freedom. Maybe sounds a little bit out there, but I think in some ways it's kind of what we're doing. We're promoting medical and monetary freedom.
When you go and you take a look at how this has played out so far, again, you guys continue to acquire more and more Bitcoin as you're going. What is the tools that you have figured out that are best for you guys? Each company is different, right? You guys had cash, you've got the profitability. Are you just selling equity? Are you using convertible notes? Like, walk us through maybe the how the sausage is made of getting the capital to buy the Bitcoin.
Definitely. It's funny. Just as a preface to that, I follow the stock market extremely closely. I have for 25 years, and people are so cynical about what we're doing with this idea of a Bitcoin treasury strategy right now. And you can see it in the performance of the stocks. It doesn't make sense to a lot of traditional players in the market, and so. How we're thinking about it is kind of we're really differentiated. MicroStrategy is fantastic. Metaplan's fantastic. The rest of the companies that have adopted treasury strategies, I'm not sure. I don't know them well enough, and they seem relatively small, and I'm not sure that they are fully on board. I just don't know enough. But from our standpoint, what we're trying to do is accumulate as much Bitcoin as we can. We're the 10th largest corporate holder of Bitcoin now. We have, up until a few days ago, we had over 300 million of Bitcoin on our balance sheet. And
what happened?
Yeah, what happened? This is great though. I mean, for us, I hope. I know it's painful in the short term, but this happened to us when we first started. We shot our wad. We bought 60 million of Bitcoin like out of the gate as soon as the SEC finally approved us. And Bitcoin dropped 25%, like instantly, because of the Mt. Gox announcement of the distribution. But we had no idea it was coming, and then boom. And so it really tested our conviction, and thankfully our board, who was new to this, was all in, and we just kept buying. So now we're at 300 million. We've done it kind of a third through ATMs, selling our shares to buy Bitcoin. We've also done it through a convert. We did a $100 million convert, which was really well received. And then we've done $100 million almost in operating cash flow. So it's kind of a combination of those. And what we're really trying to be is a huge holder of Bitcoin over time, a huge corporate holder. And also we want to be kind of a great dual-pronged story of, a good medical story and a good Bitcoin accumulation story.
What are the challenges with doing this? Everyone will say, hey, I put Bitcoin on my balance sheet. My stock price went up. I look like a genius. This is awesome. Everyone go do it. It doesn't come without obstacles, friction, challenges. What would you say are those things that you've discovered along the way?
Today's episode is brought to you by Reed Smith. The practice of law has the power to drive progress, to move businesses forward, and support them in achieving their goals. By seizing opportunities and overcoming obstacles, Reed Smith is focused on outcomes. I personally use them as my law firm, and I think that they are fantastic. They know that your time is valuable and that your matters are important. Their deep industry knowledge, long-standing relationships, and collaborative structure make them the go-to partner for complex disputes, transactions, and regulatory matters. Reed Smith delivers purposeful, highly engaged client service that drives progress for your business. Go to reedsmith.com to learn more about the best lawyers in the game. reedsmith.com. Go check them out today. It's no secret that Bitcoin ETFs have taken Wall Street by storm. With over $35 billion in assets in just 1 year, it's become the most successful ETF launch in history. My partner Bitwise is the first and only Bitcoin ETF provider to openly publish its Bitcoin wallet addresses, allowing anyone to verify the fund's holdings. I believe this level of transparency is exactly the kind of innovation that only crypto makes possible. Bitwise is also the only ETF issuer that is a crypto specialist asset manager, meaning their team solely focuses on Bitcoin, and they have the research, education, and support to help investors navigate the space with confidence. All of that is great, but what I love most about Bitwise is probably their commitment to developers. Bitwise donates 10% of their ETF's profits to Bitcoin open source developers. Bitcoin developers are the unsung heroes, working tirelessly to maintain, improve, and innovate the blockchain. Their efforts ensure that Bitcoin remains true to its promise as a decentralized system that is built to last. Go to bitwisepomp.com to learn more about their ETF and other services. Once again, that's bitwisepomp.com. bitwisepomp.com. As always, remember investing is risky and carefully consider the extreme risks associated with crypto before you invest.
It was actually really hard to do at first. I mean, first of all, the SEC was a different SEC, and they were just busting our balls. You know, it was tough. They were just coming back and forth questions and really delayed stuff for us. It was very frustrating. I think we're probably hopefully past that, experience for new companies. And I think that there's a lot of accounting and legal stuff as a public company that you have to deal with. I'm happy to help anyone who wants that kind of help, but it's laborious and it takes a few months to kind of get through all of that, and it's costly and it's expensive. I think though that there is definitely a psychological barrier. As public companies, most boards aren't going to do this. I'm pretty cynical about larger companies doing this.
Why?
I just think that it's very tough for most of these larger companies. Their boards are older people who are looking to just maintain the status quo. They don't want to rock the boat. They don't have that much skin in the game. It's a huge risk from their standpoint. There's, obviously with the volatility we've seen right now, they're less inclined to do so, I would think. And I think that you're going to need a real contrarian leader at one of these companies, especially a company that has like voting, where there's tight voting control. A company like Zoom Communications, I talked about recently in a tweet. Like Zoom's a $25 billion company. It has $8 billion of net cash. It's controlled by one guy, the founder. Their business is just flatlining. Their stock has been a horrible performer over several years. And they're not doing much about returning capital to shareholders. They really don't have a great growth future. They're a great example of a company that should do it. And they have a guy who's a technology savvy guy as the founder of their business who could make that decision almost single-handedly with his board. You need to find situations like that. And if Zoom Communications decided to go do this, it's huge. I mean, they could accumulate billions of dollars of Bitcoin pretty quickly.
Do you think that in those situations, even though they have all the construction and infrastructure and cash and all the things that you would need to execute this, they got a product that is working just well enough where it's kind of the classic like innovator's dilemma? If the product was worse, that would actually mean it'd be easier to do it. But because it's working, you kind of are like, we should keep investing here.
I think that's true. That's why that's probably another reason why these things just take time. But they're probably closer to it than others in the sense that they can see the writing on the wall. They've thrown a lot of spaghetti at the wall to try to jumpstart growth. They've invested a lot of money that's kind of gotten no return. So, maybe it's too premature to talk about them that way, but it's absolutely right. You do need a business that is kind of clearly, not, they've given up hope.
Let's talk about leverage. You all, I think, are more than 2 times from a leverage to equity kind of ratio than MicroStrategy. I think you guys are 22, 23%. I think they're closer to like 8 or 9. I don't know about Metaplanet, but talk about how you think of that leverage percentage, and is higher better, is lower better, and kind of what the pros and cons are.
Yeah, I think that's also a really important difference between us, Metaplanet, and MicroStrategy. For better or worse, we are much more levered. And so when people want to talk about a premium? What should we trade at a premium? If you believe in the upside of Bitcoin, then yeah, we should. We're a levered play on Bitcoin, and MicroStrategy's levered, but not nearly to the extent we are. And same with Metaplanet. They have small amounts of leverage, but they don't. It's not long term. They're not really a levered business. And so I think that is another distinction. We're kind of this dual pronged story of medical and Bitcoin. Plus, we are, I think, a legitimately levered business on Bitcoin. We have $100 million convert, which we treat as debt, and we have a market cap in the $400 million range.
When I think of this whole, kind of world, the biggest question that I get from people, what is your average cost of Bitcoin?
It's in the 80s.
Okay, so let's just say 85.
Right near it.
For hypothetical situation, let's call it 85,000.
Yeah.
If Bitcoin's price falls below that $85,000 mark, what happens, and how do you think about what you need to do or not do once you get the Bitcoin price below kind of the average cost of a Bitcoin treasury company?
We buy more. We just hopefully get aggressive and buy more. That's my hope. But in terms of our debt's 5.5 years. It's due in 5.5 years. There's no put that they can't be put back to us before that. So we have until like 2030 to pay off our debt. It's not something I'm concerned about.
Now, if you take that a step further, at lunch recently, somebody said, well, let's take it to the extreme. And they said, okay, your Bitcoin goes below that average price. Shareholders see that, and whether they're sophisticated or not, they say, that looks bad. And they start to sell down your stock. If your stock market cap begins to collapse, now all of a sudden that leverage percentage goes up. Is there like a doomsday scenario, or is there something where you said, hey, if I look at this is the thing that would be the kind of biggest issue we could possibly face in a downside kind of crisis situation?
No, zero. I think in some way, Saylor talks about permanent capital. We don't have permanent capital, but our debt is 5.5 years out. We don't have any short-term issues with our debt or interest. We have cover that through our operating cash and through cash on our balance sheet. So no. But it's interesting. I remember those days as an investor, when MicroStrategy faced these days. So, I'm very aware of how investors think and, what types of scenarios they could throw out there. But, being on the other side now, I really don't have any concerns. I don't mind it. If I obviously want our stock to go up every day, but I am a long-term holder. I've owned this shares in this company for 20 years. And so I hope to own them for a longer. And I don't have any real concerns about short-term stuff like that. I think it's going to end up working out for us. We also own, close to $300 million of Bitcoin. That's got to be worth something, right? So,
when you see this playing out, is there a world where you are price sensitive to buying? So as Bitcoin is volatile, it was at 109,000, it goes to 85, it's back to 90. Are you all sitting there and you've got a model and you're like, okay, we should wait a day? Or do you have a secret technical analyst sitting somewhere and you're like, it's going to drop 10%, let's wait?
Yeah.
Or are you basically just saying, hey, every second we get our hands on cash, we're just buying and we're not sensitive whatsoever to that price?
I think we're kidding ourselves if we're not sensitive to that. I think a lot of people say, no, you can buy it at any price. I don't necessarily agree with that. I think that it's great at any price, but I'm not going to necessarily buy it at any price. So I would try to be a little more crafty about it than that. I wish we had been more craftier, but you can't always control that. Unfortunately, when we've had cash available, Bitcoin has kind of near its peaks. It's just the way it's worked so far. But I think you have to decide. Am I going to buy it over a day, 2 days, a week, 3 weeks, a month? There is definitely pressure from the Bitcoin community to go out there and buy it all at once, and I respect that, but I also think that you need to be reasonable and you need to be methodical, and so I would say that you just got to use common sense, and if our board or whoever's doing this feels like there's something to be worried about and we should wait a little longer, then we should wait.
What happens if you sell Bitcoin, Metaplanet sells Bitcoin, or Strategy sells Bitcoin. I think a big part of why people are interested in this is they're basically like, these are, diamond hand companies. They're only buying Bitcoin. It's like they have no sell button.
Yeah.
But for some reason, either you change your mind, you have to sell, something, whatever the thing could be. But these companies sell even one Bitcoin.
Yeah.
It kind of violates the whole narrative of long only, never sell. What do you think the market kind of reaction to that would be?
I think they'd puke. Yeah, I think the market would puke. I would puke. So
no one said Eric's not honest.
So no, absolutely. I think no one has that expectation that we're going to sell any Bitcoin. I think they expect us to buy more Bitcoin. I think that for us,
Today's episode is brought to you by Bitcoin OS. They're the ultimate upgrade to Bitcoin. Bitcoiners can now experience the magic of the entire crypto world, including DeFi, scalability, privacy, and more, without giving up control of their hard-earned sats. Powered by revolutionary zero-knowledge technology, Bitcoin OS lets other blockchains plug into Bitcoin, offering their services to the world's largest digital asset. This lets Bitcoin holders securely move their coins across the crypto landscape, turning Bitcoin into a productive, programmable asset. Putting your Bitcoin to work once meant trusting centralized companies and bridges to protect your assets, a model that's lost crypto owners billions to hacks and fraud. Bitcoin OS lets you be your own boss, using a system based on cryptography rather than trust, the way Satoshi intended. Using Bitcoin OS, altcoins are returning home, eager to plug into Bitcoin security, network effects, and $2 trillion capital base. Bitcoin is the first and final boss of all digital assets, and will soon be reborn as the foundation of a united crypto world. Follow Bitcoin OS on Twitter at BTC_OS and be early to Bitcoin again. Follow Bitcoin OS on Twitter today at BTC_OS.
the reason we wouldn't sell it, truthfully, is that we think Bitcoin is worth at least the value of gold. I mean, it's pretty simple, right? Like, if you think that Bitcoin is worth probably more than gold because it's digital and other factors, then it should trade. Then it's got 10 times or more upside now, right? So, like, why would you sell it? It's got so much upside, and you don't have to sell it. Why wouldn't you just buy more? And so that's how I think about it. It's very simple, and I think that is such a powerful concept. It's so simple, but that's what gets a lot of CEOs potentially interested, because they always say, I can't value it, it has no cash flow. But there's a really good valuation disparity that you can take advantage of. And I think that's why it's such a great investment. So people say, oh, they're just copying MicroStrategy, or they're playing a financial game or whatever. It's bullshit. I just believe in the value of Bitcoin. I want to own a lot of it because I think there's tremendous upside in it. And if they're not going to give us a premium for that, I don't care. We're going to make a lot of money owning Bitcoin. So I just love the valuation story, and I love the fact that it's becoming more institutionalized. And so that's kind of where I stand on it.
Talk a little bit operationally very quickly. How many people are working on the Bitcoin strategy versus the rest of the company? And, is it like, hey, we need 3 people and that's it, and we can do this forever at any, amount? Or is there like, hey, for every $1 billion, we think we need another person on payroll? Or how do you think about, kind of operational support?
That's a good question. We don't have that many people working on it. It's pretty easy to do with just a few people. We're lucky. We have a great CFO. Renee Cormier has just been amazing, and she's very sophisticated and is good at modeling. And we definitely have models. We can go back earlier, but we do have kind of a model of where we want to, of ratios of how we think about buying Bitcoin relative to where our stock's trading. So she manages that for us, and we do a lot of math and a lot of modeling around it. But we don't need a lot of people. I'm interested though, like as it becomes, I don't know where Bitcoin's going from a financing standpoint, as we get into preferreds and we get into other areas of capital raising. It may require more people. We may need to, we don't have a PR firm, we don't have a marketing machine or anything. We haven't had to really do that for our medical business. Maybe at some point it requires that, but right now we don't have any plans to expand.
Ladies and gentlemen, Eric Semler.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
That was so much great.